Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette. We're still at Kensington Hornets, and Jack had the idea that we talk to you about
what to look for when you're shopping vintage.
Because when you're buying vintage, right, these things may have stains, they may have issues, they may have been altered. These are all things you don't have to think about when you buy a new item. But the worst thing that can happen is you see this thing, you think you like it, you take it home, and then...
Yeah, if it's not good, then you've probably spent a decent amount of money on something. And it's not only that, I mean, we're lucky in Hornets because this is really well sourced vintage. But sometimes you can get people that kind of be a bit more brand conscious rather than quality conscious. So it's worth knowing what you're looking at and the hallmarks of something good. Of course, we've done a video about that, which you can check out here.
But Hornets has a good selection. They have a lot of items that are handmade, bespoke items versus factory-made items. Right. And so quickly identifying whether something is handmade or not is super helpful. I mean, here they make it easy with their system where they write everything on the tag.
And it's color-coded, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. They make it more like a new shop, so to speak, where you can quickly come in and see, hey, this is working for me, or no, it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, for instance, that I'm quite a small size. They don't have a lot of small sizes, so if I see the right color for my size, I can kind of just swoop on that and make sure that I can check it out. So green is my color. If you're a small size and you come to Hornets, you're looking for green. But this one, we think, is probably around 1920s, 1930s. I mean, it's got a lot of details. The fact that it's quite a short jacket is very typical of that era. The fact that there's no vents in the jacket is also very typical of the era.
Yeah, and also the stitch density in the back. That, you know, is the higher the stitch density, the more handwork it is, the longer it takes, and the more likely it is to be older. And then you can see the shoulder seam here, right? Modern jackets have the seam pretty much down the center, versus these ones have them pulled back. You can sometimes see the same on like Caracini jackets, where they kind of try to keep that pattern to emulate that vintage feel.
And it's heavy, right?
Yeah. And I mean, look at that lining here, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's obvious signs of wear, but then there's a kind of a trade-off that you have to do. If something's very old, you've got to expect some wear. If it's pristine, you're going to pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah. And one area where you can look if something is worn a lot is the corners, especially the corners that get wear. So this jacket here, for example, there's not much wear here. Also, look at the hem. Look along the hem. Is there stuff? Then look at the lining. Is the lining ripped? Is the lining stained? So here I can see the lining was actually already taken out, or something happened here.
I think it's been
taken out,
been lengthened.
Oh yeah, you can see that here too. You can see there was the ironing of the previous hem. So that's what happened, and that's not bad. It's just something to look out for. Also, on the inside, you can check on the armhole. How worn is the area in the armpit? Because that's where the most friction happens. So if you see the fabric thinning, the stitches being undone, that means that fabric has been worn. On the flip side, if it looks like new, that means it hasn't been worn much.
And I think, yeah, there's a little bit of rubbing and wear against the twill lining that we see here. Again, this jacket is actually in pretty good condition for its age, I'd say.
Absolutely.
And another feature that kind of sets it apart is the fact that there's only the one inside breast pocket, and it's quite high up on the jacket. You see that this side is completely bare.
Another sign of being vintage, right? And then you can look at the buttonholes, especially the back side. How, is it a handmade buttonhole? Yes, it is. So,
and wow, we've just seen an extra detail. There's an inside pocket on this waistcoat. That's very vintage. I quite like that. Hadn't seen that yet.
Absolutely, yeah. But so whenever you buy something, take the jacket, lay it somewhere where you have a lot of light, and inspect it in its entirety. Make sure there's no discoloration, there's no holes. And even if it's something in an area where you're maybe fine with it, you can maybe use it to negotiate the price down. Just look at everything, make sure you you're not disappointed. For example, here, what we can see here, the fabric is a bit shiny. That means, someone probably used an iron that was too hot and ironed it a little too much. Not something that I like, and it's something where I'm like, I rather not take that, right? On the flip side, if you buy a shirt, and there is a stain all the way at the bottom where it's always tucked in and it's never visible, you're like, okay, that's fine by me because that doesn't impact the wear, it doesn't impact the look, and I'm good with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Something like a shirt, for instance, as long as the parts that you want to be seen are okay, collar, cuffs, then you're pretty good, right?
Yes. And same when it comes to shoes, right? When you have these, if you look at the soles, you can see if something has been worn. You can look at the heel, if they're worn evenly. I mean, look at this one, right? There's hardly anything.
And it's around here that we're looking. Because as we step, we always step with a bit of pressure in particular places, and most shoes get bent, or it looks like it's bent.
They have more wear on the outside typically, unless you have a foot imperfection, can also be worn on the inside. So you look for a very even wear. And here, obviously, there's paint on there still, so not much has been worn. They've been dried on, but otherwise this shoe is unworn. I mean, here you see a lot of dust, so you may have to do some cleaning.
But the good thing about what's inside here is that you don't see much of a footprint. You can't see the shape of someone's feet, you can't see the indentation of toes, which means that someone hasn't worn this, like you say, for very more than possibly a couple of wears. So again, it's another topic that we've discussed about whether buying used shoes is icky, but that's up to you.
Even if you have a suit like that, right? I mean, look very carefully everywhere. For example, here, I see this little stain. So, maybe it was dry cleaned in a store like this. Chances are it has been dry cleaned already. So, will your dry cleaner be able to remove that stain or not? And even if you're like willing to give it a shot, you can probably negotiate and say, hey, there's something here, and they can look at it. Maybe they can try to fix it. So it always pays to look at everything very, very carefully.
Oh yeah, look, there's a broken button here. That's an easier fix, of course. You simply sew a new button on, but still, something good to look out for.
Yeah. And, this is a bespoke item. Kentes and Lacter, I think.
Lacter?
Right? Yeah. And it says, 5413, so it was probably made in 2013, not in 1913, but in 2013. And so you get an idea of how old is the jacket, And again, you can look at all the same things. You can look at the sleeve lining, right? What does it look like? I mean, this is in really good shape here. We can look, there's very fine stitching on the collar, right? That's a good indicator. It's a handmade garment. Fantastic. The buttonholes, look neat or handmade. Beautiful. There's a fully canvas bespoke suit. There's a little imperfection. So you have to make that call if you want to have that risk that the stain will not come out. One thing you can see here too is it has beautiful pattern matching, right? All aligns. That's a hallmark of a bespoke garment because they can get it all perfectly right. But again, we look at the pockets, right? Is anything worn? The inside pockets? No.
Armholes are good.
Armholes are good. So yeah, the pants are nice. So yeah, I mean, considering that this garment is unusual, this is an unusual suit pattern. Typically, it would be just a sport coat. And the condition it's in, I would probably risk it because I think you can probably get this out. And it's not in a very visible spot. It's at the back. You see a little bit here, right? There's little spots here. Sometimes with a fabric like that, it could be part of the fabric. But you have to be keenly aware of it. There's a little spot here, there's a little spot here. So the more spots I see, the less inclined I am to buy it. Because then you're like, ooh, there is more to this than first meets the eye.
Something that could potentially offset that is the fact that as this is a herringbone weave for the most part of the cloth, there's the potential that as the light changes, the spots aren't super visible. But no, I appreciate what you mean as well, though. This one's a red tag. Is it your size?
Yes.
Ah.
I'm a red tag. Yeah. Another thing that I think they really have it, it's unusual, are all these livery pieces. You don't see that normally very often, and if you find them, they typically have imperfections. Here, for example, you can see there is areas in the fabric that are worn, right?
Yeah.
So that's also something you can then look for. Just the areas of the fabric themselves. Are there holes? Are there spots where they're worn?
This is another garment that's got a lot of age, had a lot of use, and is probably something that we're not going to be taking home with us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really nice silk velvet, but you know, it's so old, you could probably, I mean, you can clearly see, you know, this was the fabric, the velvet is worn off, and now you see the structural canvas underneath of it. If you want to kind of exhibit this garment as for its historical purpose, I mean, you looked at some of the buttons, it says George the Sixth Regent, right?
Regina. Yeah, so this was made during the reign of George VI.
So that means, you know, this is a really old garment. If you want to exhibit it on a mannequin, for example, that's what it's great for. Otherwise, I'd say thumbs down because it is not something that I would wear. And why would I want a garment that is damaged that I don't exhibit and I don't wear?
In any case, it's a green tag, so this is one that I would be able to wear.
Vintage shopping is undoubtedly one of the most enjoyable pastimes if you're a classic style enthusiast. What tips and tricks do you have when you go vintage shopping? We'd love to hear them in the comments below. We had so much fun on our trip to Hornets, and we're particularly grateful to staff member Chris, who showed us around.